This is Gwen Lafleur, and I wanted to introduce you today to my new line of Boho Bits. They're embellishments from Emerald Creek Craft Supplies, and it's a line of semi-precious gemstones, crystals, mica, just really beautiful natural elements that are the kind of thing that I love to incorporate into my artwork. And I love them because they just really fit with my travels, the places I've been, and also with my style, the kind of boho grunge look that I really love. So I've got 6 of the 7 bits here that are the ones that I'm going to be using in this video, and they're just a lot of fun. I've got some Mexican fire opals that are natural opal material, and I've got my peacock pebbles that have some beautiful blue and green stones in them. I've got beautiful crystal and all kinds of fun things in here that I just love to use, and I'm excited to show you how to use them because I know that these are going to be something that you're going to look at them and go, what on earth would I do with those things? They're rocks. So I'm going to show you one of the ways that I love to use rocks in my mixed media artwork. And so the demos that I did at Creativation, I wanted to do another version of that on video so that everybody could see that and see one of my favorite ways to use them. And so here's one of the examples. I'll put the video or put the photos in the video, but you can see what I'm going to make is kind of a medallion like this and just show you how you can create a cool custom embellishment. Here's another example with using some of the boho bits mixed with some of the other gemstones, the quarry gemstones from Emerald Creek, and some beads and buttons, and just make these really cool embellishments really quickly. And then there's another one there, and then show you how you can layer that on top of the embossing powder technique that I'm showing in a different video, using my Boho Blends embossing powders, and just see how they work together and the cool things that you can do with them. So this is just one way that you can use Boho Bits, but I really hope that you enjoy it, and I can't wait to show you. Okay, so for the first tutorial that I'm going to do for Boho Bits, which is this video, I wanted to show you how I make these medallions that I showed in the introduction. There's an example of one of them, and you could just see that in here I've combined them with some stenciled and embossed images. And these are samples of the demos that I did at Creativation, and I kind of wanted to recreate those, but do them a little bit slower, a little bit less rushed, and have those available sort of as a resource for everyone. And for people who weren't able to see them or didn't catch Facebook Lives or whatever the case may be, I'm going to show you how you can create one of these medallions and just make a completely custom embellishment that you can use as a gorgeous focal point in your artwork really pretty easily and pretty quickly using Boho Bits combined with some other stuff. So the first thing I'm going to do is I've got one of these buttons, and these are just plastic buttons that you buy them in bulk at the craft store. They're really just cheap, and you know, they're meant to be fancy, but they're plastic. But what we're going to do is I'm going to pop this out. Got this centerpiece right here, and I'm going to start by embossing this. So I'm just going to take a Versamark pad and completely coat my button in the ink and cover that up again. Then I'm going to get out my tray that I put my embossing powder in. And let's see, the 3 that I like to use to do this of my powders, I've got Burmese Jade, Lapis Lazuli, and Turkish Bronze. And I think, let's go with the lapis. So all I'm going to do is, you can see lapis stone is this very distinct shade of blue, and true lapis has gold mixed into it, and some little teeny tiny flakes of white, and you can barely see them, but there's some of that in there. So I'm going to shake this up, and then just go ahead and dip that right into the powder. Cover that up again. And the tray here is just in case I spill anything, which has been known to happen. And then I'm going to use, these are copper tongs. You can get these in industrial supply. I like them because they don't conduct heat, so I can hold things that I'm heating with a heat gun and not burn myself. And I'm going to use, this is my new favorite thing in the entire world. This is my Wagner Studio heat gun that I got at Creativation, and I absolutely love it. So we're just going to turn this on, pray that I don't set off any smoke alarms, because not that I've done that already. And we're going to go ahead and melt this powder. So there we go. That looks pretty cool. So I don't need that anymore. going to set this aside. We're going to wait until that's totally cool. And while we're waiting for that to cool, I'm going to get the base. And one thing that you can do, if you look at this particular sample, I've used some alcohol ink on the plastic itself. So I'm actually going to get some of that out. So I used some alcohol ink on that, and what I'm going to do, just take a paper towel here, and I'm just going to start with some espresso. And this just helps to make it look a little bit less like plastic. And this was not part of the demo that I did, but it's one of the things that I've done at home because I just wanted it to be a little bit more special. So I'm going to dab just a little bit off the surface and then go ahead and add the rust. Okay. And that looks a little bit better. And then, of course, you could heat emboss the edges of this as well. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to use this StazOn ink, the black, because the StazOn is a solvent, and so it will stick to this plastic and it's not going to smudge off once it dries, and it dries very quickly. So I'm going to just put a little bit of an edge on that and rub it across the surface. And then you can see that I've already transformed this little craft store plastic button just a little bit. So we'll set those aside, and then I'm going to get my tacky glue and just put a little bit here. Off the edge. And then I'm going to take a pair of scissors and just cut most of the shank off of this button. Because otherwise it's not going to be flat. A little bit more. Okay. And then just going to insert it right back into the hole. Okay. So we've got a nice little customized button, and look how different that looks from that plastic button that we started with. So I'm going to get my tacky glue back out, because this is going to be the centerpiece that I build the medallion around. Now you could use a lot of different things if you had a large stone that you wanted to use, or some kind of a charm. Some of the samples that I've got, let's see here. On one of the samples here, some of them I gave away, but on this one here you can see I've used a Turkmen button and then coated that with some Turkish bronze. Give it a little bit of extra aging effect. So you can use anything that you want as the center point, but I like to have something. You don't have to. You could do some kind of a design or something and just leave that as it is. But let's go ahead and zoom in just a little bit. And this is going to challenge my ability to stay in frame on the camera, but we're going to try. Now let's go ahead and start on the medallion. So I use a few different kinds of glue. I'll use PVA glue, or I'll use this Aleene's tacky glue. The tacky glue is what I will frequently use for the adhering the stones, because they're a little bit heavier, and so I want something that is nice and strong. So what I like to do is, the stones are semi-precious gemstones and crystals, and so they're not cheap. And one jar of these is $6.99 US. And there's, you get a fairly good amount in here. These are the crystal embers. They're beautiful raw citrine semi-precious gemstone. And you get a variety of different size chunks. The crystal embers are a little bit larger, which I like, because I like to use bigger chunks sometimes. And so because they are a little bit more expensive, and because these are kind of a a precious thing, I don't use a ton of them in one project. So if you saw any photos of the booth samples that I did 6 samples at home for the booth. I used the bits on all of them, and I did all of those plus 2 more samples while I was in my hotel with just one set of jars. But I don't use a ton of them on any given piece. So what we're going to do is just kind of look and see, what do we want to use? I've got this lapis here, so I think I want to go with something that's kind of in like the gold and the blue family. So we're going to look at the peacock pebbles, and that has a beautiful mix of some green and blue stones in here. They're tumbled stones, they're nice and shiny and smooth. And I don't want to use the great big ones on this one, although I do really like the big ones. So I think I'll pick maybe 3 of these. And then I will take some of the blue. This is a blue apatite. These are apatite geode chips. Although I don't think apatite actually comes in geodes. I'm going to take a few of those. And so these are the ginger crystals, and they are one of my favorites. They're all my favorite. This is one of my favorites. And I've got 2 jars combined in here, so what you see in the jar is more than you would normally get, but this is about what you'll see. And you've got some crystal rods, and you have some tumbled crystals and some tumbled gemstones, and a lot of really beautiful things. And so I want to get some contrast in here, and maybe just pick up a couple of the yellow. These are very light yellow. That doesn't seem like enough. I want an odd number. To balance this out, I think I need one more little apatite chip. I just need an odd number to make it feel balanced to me. Okay, so I've picked out my gemstones, and I'm just going to kind of move them to the side and just come in with my glue and just add a ring of glue. If I'm just doing one-off gemstones, I just place a little dot of glue and I do them one at a time. But because I'm pretty much circling this entire thing, and I'm just going to push these back into place now. And I'm going to put another coating over top of this later to help seal it. You want a good glue at the base to help hold them in place. But that's not going to be the only thing that holds them, because, you know, they're rocks. So even though they're little rocks, they're still kind of heavy. And so we want to make sure that we get them extra secure. Okay, so that looks nice. So I'm going to move these out of the way. And then I'm going to bring in, these are query gemstones. I turn them upside down so that I can see what's inside of them. And these are also from Emerald Creek. And I will have a bunch of these in my shop as well. We've got some different ones here. I'm kind of thinking I want to do the contrast here with the red on the jasper, or I could do some carnelian. I love carnelian. Or I could do both. Why not do both? Let's do both. So I'm going to just add a couple of dots. The glue will dry clear, so if any of it is showing around the side, that is okay. And we may have shifted a little bit. We'll just move it right back. And then I want to add in some of these jasper chips. And the thing I like about these is that they don't have holes in them. You can buy gemstone chip beads and they're drilled, and I don't like that because I don't like to have holes sticking up in the things that I'm doing. And so it's really hard to find any of these semi-precious gemstone chips that have not been drilled with holes, and it's especially hard to find them this tiny, and I really, really love them. Now, the thing about having them this tiny is that you want a little spoon, and then you want a little tray, because they're going to go everywhere. So I have my little tiny plastic spoon. I'm just going to start to put these here on my glue. And again, we'll seal this down later on with something else so that we've got it glued down on the top and the bottom. And I do think that I want a little bit more on one side here. So I'm going to add just a little bit more glue. And you can see here that we have already built out a pretty good medallion without having to go really crazy or do a whole lot of work. So I want to go ahead and put those away. And this is the part where now I like to use beads. So let's get a basket. I've got a basket of beads here. Back it up just a little bit. And let's see, what kind of beads do we want to use? I've got some blue ones that are pretty similar to the color of lapis, so let's get those out. And then how about, and these are all seed beads. I love seed beads. I use them all the time. Let's go ahead and just use some gold. We could get really crazy. I'll think about it. Let me get those out. Okay. Now when it comes to seed beads, what I usually do is get some PVA glue in one of these fine liner bottles. And I will also frequently place beads with a hat pin because I like to just, you know, go crazy and spend too much time doing these things. But it's because I like to have the beads so that the holes don't show. So you can do this. Let's do it this way first. I'm going to zoom back in here. And what I'm going to do is just get my tacky glue back out because it's faster. And I'm going to just go ahead and add it all the way around. Now, the fast and easy way to do the beads is just to do it this way. And you could just dump them, but it's going to go everywhere. Ask me how I know. So I'm going to use the spoon. So when you do it this way, it's much faster. You'll see the holes in the beads, but if that doesn't bother you, then this is the way to do it. And then let's go ahead and get the glue back out and do the other half. And I'm pushing these in because I do want to add a border around the edge. And so I want to make sure there's a little bit of room for it. And also letting them stack on top of each other a little bit builds up some nice extra added dimension. We've got one little renegade here that needs to move. Okay, so I'm going to use my PVA glue and these trumpet beads and put a little bit of a border on here. And I'll just show you how I start it. Just put down a little bit of a line of glue because PVA glue dries pretty fast. So I just work in small sections. And then I just use the hat pin to pick up and place each bead. And it is tedious. You obviously do not have to do this. This is just how I like to do it. I find it to be a little bit of a Zen kind of activity. I think everybody has a part of the process that really kind of calms them or gives you a chance to just relax and turn off your brain a little bit. Or it gives you a chance to do something and just think. Either way. So that's what that process looks like, and I'm going to go ahead and finish putting that border around here, and then I'll be back. Okay, so I finished putting the bead border on, and you can see how that looks. I think that gives it such a nice finished look, and I really like that. But as I'm looking, I'm seeing there are a few little gaps, especially right here. So what I'm going to do is get my PVA glue again, and go ahead and add just a little bit of glue into some of these openings. And you can see what that looks like. It's a really fine little sand, so I'm going to get just a little bit. What I would like to do is one last thing. I'd like to edge this with wrought iron. This is my wrought iron embossing powder from the Boho Blends collection. And I wanted this to be like really dark old wrought iron. And so it actually has a little bit of texture to it and a tiny kind of a blue indigo undertone. The thing that's really cool about it is that it's kind of metallic and matte at the same time. Kim did an amazing job getting the formula right on this. So I'm going to get my Versamark pad back out and gently, because the glue is not totally dry yet, just run the pad around the edge. And I want the embossing powder to come up onto the edge of the beads. So we'll do 1/2. Set that kind of out of the way. Get my tongs back out because this particular process is how you burn yourself. 1/2 done, let's do the other half. This is still quite warm, just FYI, because those glass beads and the wood actually conduct that heat pretty well. Let's go ahead. So you can kind of see that it gives you this nice sort of, it's like you framing it with an ink pad or like you would do it on a piece of paper, only doing it on your 3D object. That is the medallion, and in reality that took, you know, I was taking my time, so it was maybe about 30 minutes, even with the beadwork around the edge, to have something completely and totally custom. So what I want to do to finish it, because I said earlier a few times that I was going to use something in order to lock all of those beads and stones in place. So let's come back in a little bit. So what I've got is I have a polymer or gloss medium, and it is in a fine tip bottle, and then a smaller fine tip bottle I've got matte medium. And these are both really thin acrylic mediums. Well, not super thin, but they're thin enough that they're going to go down in between the nooks and crannies of the beads and the stones that are on here. And you can do, these were done entirely with like a gloss medium, and it really depends on the look that you want. So I'm going to do matte medium on part because these are raw stones and I want to keep the matte look of the raw stones. So I'm just going to put a really light, just a really light little line here, working my way around. Just kind of going over the places where the stones meet next to each other. And this is going to get in there and lock them to each other and then help reinforce that bonding with the wood substrate. Okay, and then I'm going to get my gloss medium and do the same thing with these glossy beads. The medium will seep down in between and then dry clear. The matte medium is going to have a little bit of a matte finish, which is what we want, and that's why I used it. And then the gloss medium will be very, very shiny, but otherwise clear. And I'll show you an example of one I did earlier. I'm going to have to move out because it's quite a bit bigger and took quite a bit longer. But here's another example of something that you could do that would be similar. And you can see size comparison here. It's very big, and it's got multiple pieces of wood that have been layered. And then you can see that I've done quite a bit around the side. I used the Mexican fire opals, and I mixed it with just some random tumbled gemstone chips that I happen to have. I've used the crystal embers here, and then the rods, the quartz rods from the ginger crystals. And then here I've used blue and green stones from the peacock pebbles, and added little bits here and there from the, which one's the ginger crystals. So you can see, and then I've got some beads, and I've used a lot of embossing powder as well. And so I think this piece turned out pretty cool. I have an idea of how I would like to use it. We'll see how that turns out. But this one I completely coated with the matte medium, and you can see it's still drying a little bit in some places, but you can see that it does completely disappear, and it mattes down the look, which, you know, as it should. But when you're using the raw gemstones, I think it's nice to do the matte medium because it helps it to not all of a sudden be shiny, and when in reality they're really kind of got that matte finish to them before they've been tumbled. So that is how we make it, and then once this dries, we'll go ahead and add it to a collage. So now our little beaded medallion with the Boho Bits is all dry, and you can see how that's turned out. We've got the matte in the center section here where I used the matte medium to seal it, and then you can see where it's very glossy over the beads where I used the gloss medium. And this is just finished and ready to go. You could turn this into a pin, you could put a pin on the back of it, paint it or whatever, and turn it into a piece of jewelry. But what I'm going to do is use this in the other video that I did where I showed how to do the embossing powder to do kind of this painting, blending collage technique with rice paper. I'm going to take this medallion that we have just made and go ahead and just glue it on there. So I'll get my tacky glue back out and just cover this, and you can see this is where I've made sure that the back in this particular case I wasn't worried about covering because I knew it was going to glue it down to something, but I did make sure the sides were all completely covered because that is going to show. So I'm going to just glue that on there, and we will leave that to set up and dry. It won't take too long. And then what I may do is go in and add some additional embellishment like I did with these other pieces. You can see that I've just taken some embellished fabric scraps that have some beadings and beading and sequins on them. On this piece I used a vintage ticket and then some other trims. This one I've got more fabric trims that I've used on it. And this one I just, as I mentioned in the other video, this one had fabric that was embroidered that I then embossed the embroidered sections of the fabric and then collaged that on top. So there are a lot of different things that you can do to finish the piece. Obviously you could leave it just like that. I think that looks just fine. And then this would work great as a book cover or as something that you mount on another panel, or you could just frame it and have it as a piece of art just like this. Alright, so that's it for the first tutorials for Boho Blends and Boho Bits. We've got the finished piece here from the two videos all put together. You can see the medallion that I made with the Boho Bits and some of the other gemstones and beads. And then on the background, using the embossing powders to create this kind of painted and blended collage image. And then you can see too that I've added some fabric and a little bit of mark making onto the background in order to complete this piece. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that gives you a few ideas for how to get started in using the new Boho Blends and Boho Bits in your own work. And I am really excited for these to get out into everybody's hands, and I can't wait to see what you do with them.